that's starting.
Yes, thank you for that, Ruth. And yes, we will certainly share the slide deck with you after the fact. So thank you everyone for joining. As Ruth said off the top. So we're going to be talking about net zero, a bit more around what it is, and then how we can assist in the space to, I guess, reduce the burden of the cost on what you're looking to do. Firstly, I will introduce our experts here in the space. So we've got Callum, who has over 8 years' experience working alongside HMRC across multiple tax schemes and with a particular sight into the sustainability space. Um, Breadth of knowledge and really loves to go the extra mile when working with the clients. And on the other side, we have Grace, who is our capital allowances expert. She brings over 10 years experience in the capital allowances space, pretty much worked across every type of building you can imagine in almost every industry. So again, you're in good hands here with both these two. So as I mentioned, what we're going to sort of talk about is what net zero is, what that looks like, and what the opportunities are there. And then we're going to look at how you can utilize us or utilize services similar to ours to mitigate those costs that are expected when doing these types of activities when you're trying to get to that net zero space. And then lastly, we've got a case study for one of our clients. Obviously, we kept it anonymous, but just to showcase the journey that they went through, the costs they were up against, and then what they were able to save off the back of that. So if we quickly look at what net zero actually is, so it was brought in 2008 as UK's way of I guess following the trend of what was going on globally to look at a way that we can reduce the greenhouse gases and the impact on the planet as a whole, setting that target to be hit by 2050. And what this means is around reducing the emissions to as close to zero as possible, and then finding ways to mitigate the remaining emissions to ensure that we're impacting the planet as little as possible. Based on what this industry is and what is important, these are sort of the key areas that we've identified that we've heard from clients that we've spoken with and dealt with previously, all the way from energy consumption, raw material sourcing, packaging, water use and waste management, the carbon footprint piece obviously being very big, changing consumer expectations, innovation, collaboration, and lastly, regulatory compliance. If we look at what they actually are and looking at what the opportunity is. So if you're looking at energy consumption, obviously this industry is very high in consumption of energy. The goals there, the opportunities there are to reduce that overall usage, whether that be through tracking what usage looks like and finding better ways to mitigate that, or alternatively looking at renewable energy sources and smarter ways to do things or do the processes to ensure that you're not consuming as much as possible, really. From a raw material sourcing standpoint, so looking through regenerative practices, whether that be agriculture or local suppliers, because as the UK looks to focus on really, I guess, utilising local suppliers, there's a lot more incentives that are provided, whether that be monetary or other, to those companies that are doing so. If we're looking at the packaging, obviously a transition from that clunky single-use stuff that is generally used because it's the cheaper option, and looking at ways to create your own that's biodegradable, refillable, and ensuring that there's the opportunities to work with other industries in a way of recycling programs and whatnot, so that you're just getting that perfect circle. and feeding into that circular economy. Obviously, water use and waste management is a big one. And what we've seen in this space is that some companies are working with universities to look at ways that they can create new ways of processing this liquid or the waste and the water side of things. And that allows you to then recoup the money that you're spending on that through incentive programs and tax relief and whatnot. In terms of the carbon footprint piece, so this is talking similarly to the energy consumption piece, but looking at alternative ways, whether that be through electric or hydrogen-based delivery vehicles, or looking at ways that you can use AI and data analytics through the supply chain process to ensure that there's no blowout in costs and numbers and all of that side of things. The innovation and collaboration piece, again, which I mentioned earlier, is around that university, working with universities or tech companies, looking for those new processes to put in place that will be able to mitigate the cost. And then what doing all of this will allow is being that sort of early adopter or first foot forward, where the regulatory bodies start to want to be involved in what you're doing and align with you on best practice so that they can plan for the future and start to make this industry standard moving forward. So what we're going to take you through from what our side of things or our business does in terms of supporting these movements is we've identified these three categories where you can get some pretty big tax savings to mitigate the costs of making that transition or starting your journey from where you are currently to achieve that net zero piece. And so what we'll be looking at is the energy component. There is a multitude of different energy schemes that are available, particularly around the energy intensive industries such as this one. We'll look at capital allowances, which covers anything from new builds to refurbs and so on and so on. But obviously Grace will take you through that. And then the last piece is all around that research and development bit. And this could be anything from making a small change within your supply chain all the way up to creating new technology. But again, we're about to dive into that. So what I will do is I'll hand over to Cal, who will take you through the energy component.
Thanks, Hector. I suppose looking at energy, energy costs really often quite a significant part of our clients' operational expenses. And I think in today's climate of rising energy prices, actually managing these costs effectively is crucial for maintaining profitability and your competitiveness. Also recognizing that it does cost money to kind of get to net zero. So if you can invest as much as you can, it's liable to look at some of these options. Navigating these incentives can be quite complex and time consuming. And I guess what many businesses are, they're unaware of the savings they can actually access or have the lack of expertise to take full advantage of these opportunities. So there's a few compensations that we want to look at today to give you an insight. Now, there's eligibility. Some people might not qualify, but if you're aware of them, at least you can make an informed decision. So I guess CPS compensation stands for carbon pricing emissions trading schemes, and increased costs for electricity generators because what they have to do is buy allowances for the emissions that they cause. Now, these costs are then passed to the consumer, and energy-intensive industries pay more because of their higher consumption. So this could lead to a significant price differential between the UK with this emissions trading scheme and countries that have low zero pricing for carbon. The important thing is, how do you qualify for such this incentive? And qualifying businesses need to demonstrate that the businesses are energy intensive. To do this, the government uses a filter test, which requires businesses to spend a percentage of their GVA, which is the sum of their EBITDA and wages on electricity, Businesses passing this test then classify as energy intensive for the purposes of the scheme. Then there's EII reliefs. Now, this comes down to what you're producing. It's more material, and it might not suit some of the people on the call today. But if you're like a glass manufacturer or you use malt, then you can qualify for this incentive. Now, this incentive is all about your efficiency. So what allows businesses to do is leverage government support for your energy saving initiatives. These incentives help reduce the upfront costs. And it's quite easy. It goes off your electricity and you can save up to 4 kilowatts per hour, 4 p.m. per kilowatt hour. And then what's really interesting to me is where we've gone into energy procurement. And because we released these two products to the market, actually what we're really realizing is brokers may be over enhancing their commission. And so with the energy procurement model that we can provide, because we've got that data set, we can actually consult on where you may be overpaying and reduce those costs as effectively as you can, or we can tell you that we've got a good deal in place. So again, what you're going to do with that money, hopefully what you'll be doing then is investing it into your route to net zero. What can I purchase because I haven't spent it there? Now, a breakdown of the schemes, again, this is something for you guys to possibly screenshot. But as you can see, the EI exemption, 4p per kilowatt hour, actually is increasing to 6p because it's becoming a better incentive in the coming year. And then CPS compensation, again, if your electricity is 1.6 kilowatt per hour. So all good incentives. The important thing is for you to reach out. And then we can deep dive into your business to understand where these exemptions may lay.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Cal. Grace, we'll hand over to you from the capital allowances perspective, please.
Perfect. Thanks, Hector, and thanks, Cal. So capital allowances is something that a lot of people have heard of. However, it ends up quite commonly being overlooked. So what it is, in short, is a form of tax relief on embedded plant and machinery within a commercial property. So what that means is it's anything that's within a property that makes it fit for commercial purpose. So you consider kind of the nature of your property, and it's those features that make it qualifying. How they work is they reduce the taxable profits of the business, so it can result in reduced future tax liabilities, or in some cases can result in a tax rebate. And when we're looking at the brewing industry in particular, breweries often have a really high level of fit out due to the nature of all the specialist equipment that's on site. So it means it can result in quite attractive and quite lucrative claims, especially if you're doing historic claims, which can result in rebates, which can really help cash flow. So what we find is typically with purchases of breweries, it could be about 23% of those costs will qualify. The reason that percentage is lower is just due to the structural elements as well that wouldn't qualify, such as bricks and mortar. Builds warrant about 32%, and then refurbishments are a whopping 55%. So again, these are really huge tax savings that we had there. So it's always worth looking into it. And when we're thinking of what kind of plant machinery would actually qualify for capital allowances, specifically in a brewing facility, so you've got fermentation tanks, grain handling systems, air conditioning, plumbing, toilets, electrical installations, even things like access systems and fobs like that would all qualify. So again, it's things that are really often overlooked and perhaps taken for granted for building that can result in tax relief. So what we'd always say is always worth having a conversation with a specialist to see whether that's been explored. Whilst a lot of accountants cover it in some capacity, what we find is it often ends up just being loose fixtures and fittings that are picked up, as opposed to some of the more specialist intrinsic fabrications of the property. So it's always worth just having a conversation just to see if it's something we can support you with.
Great, thank you, Grace. We'll jump back to you, Cal, from the R&D perspective.
Yeah, and look, this is an incentive that a lot of people are aware of that you're probably taking advantage of. I suppose where we want to cross this over is actually, if you are trying to get to route zero, your research and development activity can apply. And what you want to look at is, are you developing sustainable solutions? Like, are you trying to reduce your emissions? Are you enhancing your resource and efficiency? Are you transitioning to renewable energy sources? Every element of that route to net zero can be seen as research and development activity. And I suppose where the transition changes and what you want to see within your process as a business to try and reduce that risk of cost is, how is your process working? Is it just transactional? Are you just doing it after 12 or 24 months? Or are you engaging in that research and development consultant from quarter one? And what I mean by that, if you do live capture, actually, what it can impact is your strategic objectives of the business. Yes, I want to get to route zero. If I implement all these stages in a row, and this is how much it's going to cost, I could probably forecast that benefit for you in 12 months. Now, yes, it's going to be an estimate. Yes, people are a bit worried because HMRC are acting a bit funny. HMRC are acting the way they are and being more focused in terms of uh, focusing towards of prominent claims that are in the market at the moment. It's a good sign. However, it should not be a scaremonger exercise to go, well, I'm actually trying to be safe in the research event. You should be able to claim as much as you can, but not a penny more. But the important thing for this is the route to net zero. There are costs there that you could forecast in 12 months' time due to your route there, and you should be able to mitigate that risk in terms of cost and pile it back into your business. And that's, I suppose, where Bonham Brook have changed the market as well in terms of looking at this and helping our clients, is actually we engage with you on a more quarterly manner to be able to forecast those benefits for you and come up with a table chart.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Cal. So now we'll just jump into the case study. And as you can see off the bat, there's some headline numbers there that have been claimed across these different schemes that we mentioned earlier. So if we look at what this actually is, just a bit of background. So the brewing company that we worked with, where we started was essentially sitting down with them and identifying, one, where they wanted to look at starting their journey and where they wanted to make some immediate changes, and then two, how we were going, how the schemes that we work across were going to be able to provide a benefit and what that potentially might look like. So as you can see, the three key things there were the energy use, because there was a heavy reliance on the gas boilers for the heating, and then obviously the grid electricity for the other operations. The waste management piece was a big one as well for them. And then lastly, the packaging. They wanted to move away from that single-use plastic and look at a different way of doing things. And that was through obviously looking at an alternative, different type of pack, but then also a recycling program aligned with that to ensure that they were doing the best that they could in using as much as they could from what they had. And so where we look, where we look to assist them was around these three schemes. So again, the ones that we've mentioned earlier. And what that actually looked like in terms of planning this out with them was first piece was to look at that energy side of things. So as Cal mentioned earlier, on the energy procurement side, looking through their current pricing that they had and see if there was anywhere that some immediate wins and costs could be saved by transitioning to a different price or company or whatever it may be. Through that process, we were able to identify where they sat on the energy intensive scheme and where they would fit in and what that looked like. And so off the back of that, we then submitted the claim for them, and that's coming off their bill as they progress. So that was phase one. The next piece was looking at, okay, they've got additional fit outs that they need to get done to streamline their processes and ensure that they were adhering to net zero standards that they were putting in place. And through that process, Grace sat down with them and kind of started to allocate the capital allowances element and capture all that relevant data, whilst at the same time, Cal was sitting down with the team and looking at that plastic side of things so that we could ensure we were capturing all the data, but also putting in the right processes so that they could capture that ongoing, not only just for this 1 year project, but moving into the future as well. And then the phase three all came around the submissions of both the capital allowances and the research and development piece. And pretty soon after that, they were able to get that money back and reduce the costs of what was going to be a pretty big price for them down a fair bit. And here's what it sort of broke out to be, right? So going through that process around the capital costs and the operating costs. It was going to cost them almost $2 million to make this first step. But through the savings that we were able to identify working alongside them, we effectively knocked that back down to about 1.2 million. And so for the next year, we'll be doing the same process, sitting down with them and looking at different ways. Okay, now what's the priority now? Because you've got this sorted out. Let's look to make those next steps. And so it was a pretty exciting project, good to be a part of. And that stretch that we worked with them was about a 9-month period. So it happened relatively quickly. It was all a matter of where to start and how do we recoup the costs over this period, rather than going, okay, we've identified we've got to spend £1.8 million and we've got no way of clawing that back. How are we going to get to that point? Now, we'll end it there. I know that there's probably some questions out there, but it's always hard to start. No one wants to be the first person. So any questions, please do share them through so we can get this going.
Some questions, I always do.
Yeah.
Question for Grace on capital allowances. You spoke about historic claims. How many years can you go back?
So fortunately, you're not actually restricted by how far you can go back. So providing the plant machinery is still in place in the property and you've got some form of evidence of that cost, then you're still able to go back and claim it. So the oldest claim I've ever done was going back to 1998.
Okie doke, that's good to know. And then on one of your initial slides, you spoke, there was government assistance on sourcing UK materials. So what sort of government assistance is available?
So there's a plethora of different options. I guess it's more so what in particular you're looking for in terms of industry and that type of thing and what the actual product is. But there's a plethora of different sort of contact information, deep dive into sort of who's best placed from the sourcing perspective. So are they hitting all of their regulatory standings and all that sort of stuff. So there's a database there. We can also assist you in finding that information as well.
Great. And I've got another question, sorry. Is there a minimum size of business that can actually access this sort of funding? I mean, obviously, if you're so small, it's not going to be worth doing, I'm assuming. Is there a minimum size?
I think when you align yourself with an association and part of companies, they're always going to be a different society. I would hate to think that we would differ at our level of service. It might just be that once you approach, we can give you a cost benefit analysis. Then we can make a sensible decision if you move forward or not. Because ultimately, the big time resource is your time. And that's where the money is going to be spent. Is it worth you putting time in? So at the moment, I'd say size of business is no. We will give everyone an equal opportunity and the service level. It just might be down to the cost benefit.
Great. And I mean, where do you start? How do you start? Where's the best place to start?
I think we're all going to have similar answers. But Cal, I'll let you start and we'll see if we align.
Everything starts with an idea and what you want to achieve. A goal that's set in 3 years, 5 years time, and reaching out to have a conversation in terms of what can you do. I think we go into these rooms all the time where they're talking about net zero. Everyone gets really excited. Everyone wants to get to that route. It's actually just putting the actions in place. We can step in and make sure those actions are put in place.
Brilliant. And one final question from me. What time does a business actually need? What input in time from the business is needed to go through the process?
The whole process?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Grace can turn around capital allowance cost benefits in 24 hours. A claim can last for 3 weeks. We do all the legwork in terms of cost. Hours from your side, minimal. We want to do the most of the legwork. R&D, be looking at 5 to 6 weeks for a good claim. Again, we only expect 5 hours of your time a year. But that energy procurement is just providing your contract information. That is it. So we'll do most of the work. Again, the scope and the timescale to get to net zero can be long, but be assured that we'll be there to help.
Brilliant. Well, that's all the questions for me. Has anybody else got any questions? If they want to take themselves off mute and ask a question, please do.
Yeah, I've got a quick one, Ruth, if I may.
Yes, certainly.
We put some solar panels onto one of our cold storage facilities 2 years ago now, and we were told at the time by local government that there were no grants available for putting it up. So we went ahead anyway because we thought it was the right thing to do. Are there differences between national and local government in terms of energy incentives? No.
No is the answer.
No is the answer. Okay.
Yeah. I suppose that. And did you apply for the capital allowances off that? I mean, Grace could probably help you there.
Yeah, we've that would have been done through for our accountants. Yeah, so that would have all been done through and at the end of the year with the accountants. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. That's sort of what I thought, but I just wanted to double check with you guys.
No, definitely. Thank you for that question, Paul. I mean, if you want to explore that in a bit more detail, just reach out to us. I mean, Grace is happy to just have a look through just to make sure that all costs were captured. And yeah, happy to do that. So
yeah,
definitely.
I suppose in that case, actually, Hector, it's quite an interesting subject, isn't it? Where, the accountant, we want to work with your legal counsels as well. We're not here to replace anything. So if we can assist the legal counsel in anything and say, oh, maybe there might have been something missed, we can do that. We're not here to replace, just work alongside.
Thanks, Callum. Yeah, we are already, for full disclosure, we are already working with somebody on this. But so I don't want to step on the toes of them. But certainly, it's interesting listening to you today. Thank you very much for your presentations.
Great. Any other questions?
Not so much a question from me, Ruth, but just a comment really to shadow, I think, what Paul's just said. I think a number of us are already in the process of working on a number of those streams and are sort of part way through with our kind of existing specialists in these areas. Some of the things which you have mentioned, I think in particular, Grace, the retrospective claims going back a number of years, I think is perhaps something that we hadn't considered. And we haven't been directed in that path by kind of our existing advisors. So from your perspective, whilst you've presented on those kind of three streams where there are benefits and claims to be made, presumably as a business, you're content if we were to come to you and sort of say, cherry pick, well, we want to just focus on this one area. We think we've got some gaps in, what we're currently we're reviewing, and we'd appreciate some input there. So it's just really a kind of a statement of that we are progressing with some of these matters, but there may be some gaps that would be of interest to have a conversation about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you say that because we've recently just had a client come to us saying that they've got a gap because of COVID. They're really on top of the capital allowances, but there's some years where they've missed out. So it's isolated to that project. So if there is stuff like that you've got in mind, just let us know. We can always kind of do effectively a health check just to give you that peace of mind that stuff's being covered.
Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. If there's no other questions, we'll let you get on with your day. And thank you very much for attending. The recording will be sent to you, and it will also, as I've already said, be posted on our channels for future reference. So thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.